Can we safely make moral decisions based on arbitrary religious rules without considering the facts, opinions, consequences, and feelings of people involved in the issue? Or do we have to base moral decisions on some religious authority? How do we go about that in an American society, I guess?
Sort of related to what we were talking about earlier,
I know arbitrary. The word anything arbitrary shouldn't happen arbitrarily. The word rules, thoughts, laws, nothing should be given arbitrary deference to faith. Now, those who are making those decisions about, they can't just dissect themselves and say that faith is not a part of the decisions that I make. They can't just suddenly say, well, you know, while I'm on the Supreme Court, I'm going to pretend I'm not a Christian, or I'm going to pretend I'm not a Muslim, or whatever, or a person of no faith at all. So faith is always going to factor into how we see it. It's a part of our worldview. It's a part of who we are. It's integrated into our being. And so whether we like it or not, I think faith will always be a part of the decisions. Now I pray that they don't happen arbitrarily. I do think that we talk about, when we think about what God is doing, that there is scripture and tradition, but there's also reason and experience. That's a part of how we discern God. And in our tradition, it usually goes in that order: scripture, tradition, reason, and experience. And in that, how we are going to define things. And there are times when reason and experience have moved ahead of even scripture and tradition. I mean, it says not for men not to cut their hair in church, and I think we've safely moved past that one. Or women must have their head covered in church, and I think we've moved past that. Somehow, reason and experience has moved past scripture and tradition. We do have in our faith tradition a sense of flexibility that moves as we believe the Spirit, as God continues to move, that nothing is absent of that. Rules, maybe even laws, do change.
Yeah, I can't add much to that. I know there was one state senator who said something like, you know, when you are in Congress, you put your hand on the Bible and swear to uphold the Constitution. You don't put your hand on the Constitution and swear to uphold the Bible. Yeah, you're going to make decisions based on where you're coming from, what your faith is, but hopefully you're doing what's right for the majority of people and not imposing your will, the rights of the majority, and preventing like this tyranny of them.
Right. Like I would never get elected because I'm like a pacifist, like too far off the end of the scale pacifist. Like we should never touch a gun again. Like if I got elected, I'd immediately disband the army and turn it into a giant Peace Corps. I mean, I would never get elected. For that reason, and part of that is because my faith, I feel, demands that of me, and I don't do that arbitrarily.
And yet I think you'd have a better chance of being elected than I ever would.
Speaking of, do you guys ever see that there's an atheist politician as far as in a higher office? I mean, that was one of the questions.
So will you ever see an atheist in higher office? No, not anytime soon. There was a guy on The Daily Show just the other day, and Jon Stewart said something like, he was talking about religion in public office. Now that we have a black person in office, when will we ever see like a Jew, a lesbian, a Hispanic, an atheist? And the guy's like, yeah, pretty much in that order. Yeah, I don't think so. I think, and what they were talking about is saying, you want your politicians, you don't necessarily care what religion they are, you want them to be good people, and unfortunately we equate good person with some religious faith. And until we could change that, it's going to be really tough to get over. We have, out of 535 Congress members, only one has said they don't believe in God. And only 5 of them, not including Pete Stark of California, only 5 of them don't even list their religion. But I think most of them are Christians too, at least on paper. So we got a long way to go. We have to first start getting atheists elected to some public office. Then we can even think about anything higher than that, but it's not going to happen anytime soon.
In my own desperation, in my own conversion, in my own asking God to become aware and to become real, in my own experience yelling at my ceiling and feeling like it just yelled it back at me, it was just the ceiling. For me, God showed up in what I feel is a very supernatural way, and I don't say that as a proof to Hemant. It's something only I can experience, something I can express. But I feel like God showed up for me in a way that was tangible, real, was holy. God, I feel, really spoke to me and said something to me. And it wasn't just any God, it was the God of Jesus. And the reason for that God of Jesus is it was the one expression of faith, and on all the ones that I was curious about, which it said, you can't do it for God. God is going to have to do it for you. The others all seemed to me to be something about an earning, about being the karma, trying to do better, trying to live better, trying to do your hajj, trying to say the om, to give it to your ancestors, to acknowledge the Great Spirit, to all those things, somehow earning a salvation. And Christianity was the only one that said, you can't, and I'm going to do it for you, and I am going to repair your brokenness, and there's nothing you can do about that. So let it go. So there was a sense of feeling, there was a sense of reason, and there was a sense of criteria for me in that discovery.
I think for me personally, I think the reason I became, when I became an atheist, at least to myself, it was fast and it was sudden. It took a couple months, but it kind of hit me all at once, and I became very, I wouldn't say strident in my atheism, I don't talk about it with every sentence, but it became a big part of my life. And I think the reason is I didn't read any books that made me become an atheist. I didn't have any friends who were atheists. When those questions started popping up in my life, like, why do you believe what you believe? Where are those beliefs coming from? How come no one else has those beliefs? Nothing prompted those questions. I just started thinking of them. And when I started asking myself those questions and then trying to find the answers and realizing, hey, my religion doesn't have the answers that I'm trying to look for, and maybe they never have. And, I think the fact that I came up with it myself and I discovered it on my own, that pushed me to think that maybe there's something to this. And then when I heard from other atheists saying that that's pretty much how it happened for a lot of them too. It wasn't like someone said to them, there's no God. And they're like, oh yeah, that's right. That never happens. They kind of discovered it on their own. And I think that's what makes it so powerful, kind of in the opposite direction. Like you're saying, I can't really understand it unless maybe it happened to me. And I guess it's kind of the same way until you start thinking those things and coming up with your own explanations that maybe I don't know what the answer is, but I don't think the religious explanation is the right one. Until you start going through that and a long period of going through those questions, it's hard to just kind of explain how you become an atheist like that.
It sounds very similar.